You know, there's something absolutely fascinating that happens when you begin to pay attention to your thoughts. Not having thoughts, mind you, we all do that, but actually watching them. And what you discover, if you stay with this long enough, is quite extraordinary. You notice that there's a peculiar distance between you and your thinking. The thoughts arise, dance about, create all sorts of havoc, and yet there you are, watching them do their thing. Let me give you a very concrete example of what I'm talking about. Suppose you wake up in the morning, and immediately, before you've even opened your eyes properly, there's this thought, oh God, I have that meeting today, I'm going to make a fool of myself, they're going to see right through me. I don't know what I'm doing. Now, the usual way we experience this is complete identification. The thought appears, and we become it. We don't say there's an anxious thought arising, we say I'm anxious. We've collapsed the distance between the awareness and the content of awareness. We've mistaken the weather for the sky. But here's what's curious. If you can notice that you're having that thought, if you can observe yourself thinking, I'm going to make a fool of myself, then who is doing the noticing? You see, the thought itself can't notice itself. That would be like an eye trying to see itself without a mirror. There must be something else present, something that stands apart from the stream of thinking, something that watches. Now, most people, when they first encounter this idea, immediately create another problem. They think, aha, I must become the watcher. I must cultivate this observer. And then they start trying very hard to watch their thoughts, which creates this bizarre internal struggle, like a dog chasing its tail, because the moment you try to be the watcher, you've created another thought, another object to watch. You've just added another layer to the confusion. The real trick, and this is delightful when you get it, is to realize that you're already the watcher. You always have been. You don't need to become something you already are. The watching is happening right now, automatically, effortlessly. Even as you listen to these words, even as thoughts arise in response to what I'm saying, there's an awareness of all of it, isn't there? That awareness doesn't need to be manufactured or achieved. It's the very ground of your experience. Let me put it another way. Your negative thoughts are like clouds passing across the sky. Now, if you're identified with the clouds, you think you are dark and gloomy. The weather becomes your identity. But the sky, the vast open space in which clouds appear, is never troubled by the clouds. It doesn't resist them or cling to them. It simply allows them to drift through. Sometimes there are storm clouds, sometimes wispy little cirrus formations. Sometimes the sky is perfectly clear, but the sky itself remains unchanged, spacious, fundamentally at peace. You are that sky. Not the thoughts, not the emotions, not the stories you tell yourself, but the awareness in which all of these arise and pass away. Now here's where it gets really interesting. When you stop identifying with your negative thoughts, when you simply watch them as phenomena arising in consciousness, something remarkable happens. They lose their power. Not because you've fought them or suppressed them or replaced them with positive affirmations, but because you've seen through them. You've recognized them for what they are. Temporary events in awareness, no more substantial than a dream. Think about dreams for a moment. When you're in the middle of a nightmare, it's absolutely terrifying. The monster is real, the danger is real, your fear is real. But the moment you wake up, what happens? Instantly you realize, oh, it was just a dream. The fear doesn't gradually diminish, it evaporates in recognition. Why? Because you've shifted your identification. You're no longer the character in the dream, you're the one who was dreaming. The same thing happens with waking thoughts. When you're lost in a negative thought pattern, ruminating about the past, worrying about the future, criticizing yourself, it feels completely real and solid. But the instant you step back and recognize, this is a thought, the same kind of shift occurs. Not that the thought necessarily vanishes, but it no longer has the same weight, the same gravitational pull. Let me give you another example. Something quite ordinary. You're stuck in traffic, late for something important, and the mind starts up, this is unbearable. Why is this happening to me? That idiot in front shouldn't be on the road. I'm going to be late, and everyone will think I'm unreliable. My whole day is ruined. Now that's one level of experience, pure identification with the thought stream. And in that state, you genuinely suffer. Your body tenses, your jaw clenches, your blood pressure rises. The thoughts create a whole physiological response. You're trapped in the story your mind is telling. But suppose, right in the middle of this mental storm, you suddenly remember, wait, I'm thinking. Just that simple recognition. Suddenly there's space. The traffic hasn't changed, the lateness hasn't changed, but your relationship to the whole situation has transformed. You're no longer drowning in the thoughts, you're watching them from the shore. And here's what's beautiful. From that watching position, you might notice something you couldn't see before. You might notice that the thought, this is unbearable, is actually not true, because you're bearing it, aren't you? You might notice that the story about everyone thinking you're unreliable is just that, a story, a fiction your mind has created. You might even notice a kind of humor in how seriously the mind takes itself, spinning these elaborate narratives about absolutely everything. This isn't about positive thinking, you understand. I'm not suggesting you replace my day is ruined with everything is wonderful. That's just swapping one thought for another. What I'm pointing to is something much more fundamental. The recognition that you are not the thoughts themselves, but the space in which thoughts appear. When you really get this, not intellectually, but as a lived reality, your entire relationship with negative thinking changes. Because you're no longer asking, how do I get rid of these thoughts? That question assumes you're locked in battle with your own mind. Instead, you simply notice, the mind is producing worried thoughts right now. How interesting. There's no enemy. There's just the natural activity of consciousness watching itself. Now, the mind, being very clever, will try to co-opt even this understanding. It will say, great, I've found the technique. I'll just watch my thoughts, and then I'll be free of suffering. And then it turns watching into another task, another goal, another thing to achieve. And round we go. But genuine watching isn't a technique. It's not something you do. It's what you are. It's the most natural thing in the world, as natural as the space in a room, which doesn't have to try to be spacious. It just is. Let me approach this from yet another angle. Have you ever noticed how thoughts tend to create more thoughts? One negative thought triggers another, which triggers another, like dominoes falling. I'm not good enough leads to I never do anything right, leads to I'm a failure, leads to I'll always be alone, and on and on. The mind is tremendously efficient at creating these cascades. But here's the thing. Each of those thoughts requires your identification to continue. They need you to believe in them, to take them seriously, to think they're about you rather than simply events in you. The moment you step back, the moment the watcher emerges from the shadows, the cascade loses momentum, not because you've done anything to stop it, but because you've stopped feeding it with belief. Think of it like this. Thoughts are like visitors knocking at your door. When you're identified with them, you invite them in, sit them down, serve them tea, listen to their whole story. Before you know it, they've moved in and taken over your house. But when you're established as the watcher, you simply notice, there's worry at the door, there's self-criticism, there's fear. You don't have to answer. You don't have to engage. You can let them knock, and eventually they move on. They always do. This doesn't mean you become cold or detached or unfeeling. Quite the opposite. When you're no longer identified with every thought and emotion that arises, there's actually more space for genuine feeling, for authentic response. You're not reacting automatically from conditioning. You're responding from presence. Here's a profound paradox. The more you can watch your negative thoughts without resistance, the more they tend to dissolve. But, and this is crucial, if you watch them in order to make them dissolve, you've missed the point entirely. That's just another strategy of the mind, another form of resistance dressed up as acceptance. True watching has no agenda. It's not watching for something. It's simply the clear seeing of what is. You know, there's a wonderful thing that happens when you settle into this watching awareness. You begin to notice patterns. You see how the mind has its favorite stories, its well-worn grooves. I'm not good enough might be a greatest hit that plays over and over. Or people can't be trusted, or life is unfair. And when you see these patterns from the watching place, you realize these aren't truths about reality. They're just habits of thinking, neural pathways that have been strengthened through repetition. And here's what's marvelous. You don't have to believe them. You never did. You can let them run their course like old records playing in another room while you remain undisturbed in the spacious awareness that you truly are. Now, I want to be very clear about something because this is where people often get confused. When I talk about watching your thoughts, about being the witness, about not identifying with the mental chatter, this isn't about dissociation. It's not about floating off into some abstract spiritual realm where nothing touches you. Quite the opposite, actually. When you're genuinely established in awareness in this watching presence, you become more alive, not less. Colors are brighter, sounds are clearer. You're more present to the actual texture of your experience, rather than lost in thoughts about your experience. You see, when you're identified with thinking, you're always one step removed from life. You're living in a kind of virtual reality created by language and concepts. But when you step back into awareness, you step into the immediacy of what's actually happening. Let me illustrate what I mean. You're eating a meal. If you're lost in thought, planning tomorrow, replaying yesterday, judging the food, judging yourself for eating it, you're not really tasting anything. You're just going through the motions while your attention is absorbed in mental activity. But if you're present as awareness, actually watching the thoughts come and go without being captured by them, suddenly you can taste, really taste. The flavors are vivid, the sensations are rich, and there's a simple pleasure in the experience that thinking completely obscures. This is true of everything. Walking, breathing, listening, touching. When you're not identified with the thought stream, these ordinary experiences reveal themselves as extraordinary. The negative thoughts might still arise. I should be doing something more productive than just walking or whatever. But they're seen as transparent, like seeing through a dirty window to the garden beyond. And here's something else that happens. You begin to notice that the watcher itself has no problems. Think about that. The awareness that's watching your worried thoughts isn't worried. The consciousness that's observing your angry thoughts isn't angry. The space in which all these mental events occur is fundamentally peaceful, fundamentally okay. It's like the screen in a movie theater. It remains untouched whether the film being projected is a tragedy or a comedy. This is extraordinarily liberating when you really see it, because it means that the peace you're looking for isn't something you need to achieve. It's what you already are, beneath the turbulence of thinking. You don't need to fix yourself, improve yourself, or become enlightened. You just need to recognize what's already here, what's been here all along. But, and here's where the mind gets very tricky, you can't use this recognition as a way to bypass your actual experience. Some people hear this teaching and think, perfect, I'll just be the witness, and then I don't have to feel my difficult emotions or deal with my problems. That's spiritual bypassing, and it doesn't work. The watching I'm talking about doesn't avoid anything. It includes everything. It's a spacious allowing of whatever's arising, whether pleasant or unpleasant. The negative thoughts come, and you watch them. The painful emotions come, and you watch them too. You don't suppress, you don't escape, you don't pretend they're not happening. You simply don't mistake them for who you are. There's a tremendous difference between I am anxious and there is anxiety being experienced. Can you feel it? The first is total identification. You've become the anxiety. The second is observation. Anxiety is occurring in the field of your awareness, but you're not collapsed into it. And from that place of observation, something very interesting can happen. The anxiety can be felt fully, completely, without the secondary layer of resistance and story-making that usually accompanies it. You see, most of what we call suffering is actually the resistance to pain, not the pain itself. The negative thought arises, that's just a mental event. But then we think, I shouldn't be having this thought. What's wrong with me? Why am I always like this? And now we've created suffering on top of discomfort. We've added a whole narrative structure that magnifies and perpetuates the original disturbance. But when you're watching, there's no resistance. The thought arises, and it's simply noted, our criticism, our worry, our despair. There's no judgment about the fact that these things are arising. They're just weather patterns in consciousness, no different than clouds in the sky or waves on the ocean. And when there's no resistance, even quite intense thoughts and feelings can move through relatively quickly. They're not being